The iron pressed against flesh before Rowan could pull away. The scent came first. Burning skin mingled with the cloying rose oil that always clung to Isolde's chambers. Sweet and rotten like fruit left too long in summer heat. Rowan bit down on her tongue hard enough to taste copper. The pain bloomed hot and bright across her forearm, but she would not give the Luna the satisfaction of hearing her scream. 5 years had taught her this much silence was the price of survival. Clumsy girl. Isolde's voice dripped like honey over broken glass. She lifted the heated styling iron, examining it as if surprised by the blood on the tip. You really should be more careful when you're attending to my hair. What if you had burned me instead? Rowan kept her gaze downcast, fixed on the polished stone floor. The burn on her arm throbbed in time with her heartbeat, joining the constellation of scars that mapped nearly 5 years of torment across her skin. Forgive me, my lady. The words came out steady, practiced, empty. Through the ornate mirror, Rowan caught Isolde's reflection. Golden hair cascading in perfect waves down her back. Those ice-blue eyes glittering with something cold and hungry. Beautiful in the way winter was beautiful. Sharp, deadly if you weren't careful. And Rowan had learned to be very, very careful. You're forgiven. Isolde reached back to pat Rowan's cheek with deceptive gentleness. Her fingers lingered just long enough to press against an old bruise hidden beneath makeup. Just try not to disappoint me again. The words carried layers of threat that only Rowan could hear. To anyone else, Isolde Greythorn was grace personified. The Luna who embodied everything a pack could want in their alpha's mate. Poised, elegant, devoted to her husband and her people. But here alone in these chambers, the mask slipped away to reveal the monster beneath. Rowan resumed her work with steady hands despite the fresh wound. Her fingers moved through the familiar motions of braiding and pinning, creating the elaborate style Isolde demanded for tonight's gathering. The Luna would descend those grand stairs looking radiant, would smile sweetly at Alpha Callum when he returned from patrol, would charm the visiting dignitaries with her wit and warmth, and Rowan would remain invisible as she had learned to be. The memory came unbidden as it often did in moments of pain. 14 years ago, before the scars, before the silence. Rowan was 10 years old, crouched in the corner of a small cottage while shadows moved through the darkness outside. Her mother's hand pressed against her mouth, muffling any sound. Stay quiet, little wolf. Her mother's whisper barely stirred the air. Those amber eyes so like Rowan's own, bright with terror. No matter what happens, you survive. Promise me. Rowan had nodded, tears streaming down her face as she made a promise she would spend the next 14 years keeping. The rogues had come in the deep hours before dawn, their scents wrong and wild, carrying the stench of madness and blood. Her father had shifted immediately, his brown wolf launching toward the door with a snarl that shook the rafters. Her mother had followed, white fur erupting across her skin as she joined her mate in desperate defense. Rowan had tried to shift for the first time that night, had felt her wolf surge forward, desperate to protect, to fight, to survive. But the sight of her father's throat being torn open, her mother's agonized howl as she fell, had shattered something fundamental inside her. The transformation had ceased halfway through, pain exploding through every nerve as her body tried and failed to complete the change. The rogues had left her there, thinking her just another human casualty. Not worth the effort. She had lain among the bodies of her parents until dawn. Her wolf trapped in screaming inside her, blocked by trauma too severe for her young mind to process. For 4 days she had wandered, half mad with grief and hunger, until she collapsed near the walls of Stronghold Shadow Peak, where the great pack of the northern mountains made their home. Maeve had found her. The old cook had been gathering herbs in the forest when she stumbled upon the girl's unconscious form. Most would have seen just another orphaned human, another casualty of the rogue attacks that plagued the borderlands. But Maeve's keen eyes had caught the amber tint in Rowan's gaze, had recognized the faint scent of wolf beneath the dirt and blood. Poor lamb, Maeve had murmured, gathering Rowan into surprisingly strong arms. What horrors have you seen? The cook had smuggled her into the castle kitchens, had fed her broth and bread, had asked no questions when Rowan remained silent for weeks. Eventually the girl had spoken, had shared the truth in broken whispers. She had a wolf, but it was trapped inside her, unreachable, damaged beyond repair. Best not to mention that to anyone, dear, Maeve had advised gently. Shifters who can't shift proper, well, they're treated worse than humans who never had a wolf at all. Safer for everyone to think you're just a foundling without the gift. So Rowan had become invisible. But the years between 10 and 14 had been their own kind of wandering. Not through forests, but through grief so deep it had no bottom. Maeve had given her shelter and food, But healing took time. 4 years of nightmares. 4 years of flinching at shadows. 4 years before Rowan could work properly without her hands shaking. Before she could speak without her voice breaking. Before she could function as more than a ghost haunting the kitchen corners. By 14, she had learned to move efficiently, silent and watchful, learning to read the moods of the castle's inhabitants, learning to anticipate needs before they were spoken, learning a different kind of survival. She worked in the kitchens for 5 years after that. 5 years of slowly building a fragile sense of safety. 5 years of believing maybe, just maybe, she could have a quiet life in the shadows. She had been 19 when everything changed. It was the spring of her 5th year working in the kitchens when Alpha Callum Stone had married Isolde Greythorn. The union had been political. Everyone knew that. The Greythorn territory controlled valuable trade routes, and their alliance strengthened Shadow Peak's position against rival packs. The Alpha had done his duty as leaders always did. Isolde had arrived like a winter storm wrapped in silk and smiles. Within months, the castle staff had learned to tread carefully around her. But she saved her cruelest treatment for those who could not fight back, who had no power to challenge her. The incident that sealed Rowan's fate had been absurdly simple. Alpha Callum had returned early from a border patrol, striding into the kitchens with dust on his boots and weariness in the set of his broad shoulders. His dark hair had been tied back, revealing the strong line of his jaw beneath his neat beard. Those gray eyes had swept the room with the natural authority of a leader assessing his domain. For 3 seconds, just 3, his gaze had landed on Rowan as she bent over a cutting board. Their eyes had met. Something in his expression had shifted. Recognition, perhaps. Or simply curiosity about the quiet kitchen girl with the unusual coloring. 3 heartbeats that would change everything. Isolde had been standing in the doorway, had witnessed that brief exchange, and her pretty face had gone cold. The Luna had smiled at her husband, had taken his arm with practiced grace. But her ice-blue stare had found Rowan across the room, and in that moment, Rowan had known her life was about to become much harder. The next morning, Isolde had demanded that the girl with the odd eyes be reassigned as her personal attendant. That had been 5 years ago. 5 years of burns and bruises hidden beneath long sleeves. 5 years of hunger and exhaustion and carefully neutral expressions. 5 years of surviving one day at a time because that was all she could manage. Maeve had tried to intervene once 3 years in a Rowan service. The old cook had gone to a trusted guard, had whispered concerns about the suspicious injuries that kept appearing on the Luna's attendant. The guard had vanished the next day. Reassigned to a dangerous border post where rogues attacked regularly, a young servant girl who had been friendly with Rowan had disappeared entirely shortly after. The message had been clear. Interfere and people died. So Maeve had learned to offer what help she could in secret. Extra food hidden in Rowan's sleeping quarters. Healing salves left where she would find them. Silent companionship in the pre-dawn hours when Rowan's duties allowed her brief moments of respite. It was the only kindness Rowan knew in a world that had forgotten her. There, Isolde said now, admiring herself in the mirror. Adequate work, I suppose. Now fetch my sapphire gown. The one with the silver embroidery. Yes, my lady. Rowan moved to the wardrobe, each step measured and careful. Her arms still burned where the iron had seared her skin, but she had learned long ago how to function through pain, how to hide the trembling in her hands, the tears that threatened when the abuse became too much to bear. Inside her chest, something stirred. Her wolf, trapped and silent for 14 years, pressed against the cage of her trauma. It howled, soundlessly desperate for freedom, yearning to break through the barriers that kept it chained. But Rowan pushed it down as she always did. The world had no place for damaged shifters, no mercy for those who couldn't complete their transformation. Better to be thought human and powerless than to reveal her defect and face worse scorn. She had made a promise to her mother all those years ago in the darkness. Survive no matter the cost. So she would endure another night, another day, another year if necessary. She pulled the sapphire gown from its hanger and turned back to her tormentor, carefully blank expression firmly in place. Isolde was already humming, pleased with herself, anticipating the evening ahead where she would shine as the perfect Luna while her husband remained blind to the monster he had married. And Rowan would be there invisible in the shadows, bearing her scars in silence. The drums of war had finally silenced along the northern border. Alpha Callum Stone guided his warriors back through the mountain passes toward home 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Eager to wash the stench of death from his skin and sleep in his own bed for the first time in months. The setting sun painted the stone walls of Stronghold Shadow Peak in shades of amber and gold as they approached. Beautiful, he supposed, though beauty had become a foreign concept during 5 years of a marriage that felt more like a political contract than a union of souls. Isolde would be there, playing the dutiful Luna, and he would play the returning hero. They had both become exceptional actors. What Callum didn't expect was the scream that echoed through the castle corridors as he dismounted in the courtyard. Rowan's hands shook as she fastened the final clasp on Isolde's sapphire gown. The fabric had torn along the seam, a deliberate cut the Luna had made herself moments before, though no one would believe that truth. Already Isolde's face had transformed into a mask of fury, those cold eyes glittering with something dangerous. You ruined it. The Luna's voice came low enough that no passing servant would hear. You clumsy, worthless creature. This gown cost more than your miserable life. My lady, I can mend it. Silence. The word cracked through the air. Then Isolde's hand was in her hair, yanking Rowan's head back with vicious force. You think I don't see what you are, what you've always been, a threat. Rowan's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. Please, I've done nothing. You exist, that's enough. The first strike of the leather whip caught Rowan across the shoulders. Tearing through her thin dress and splitting skin, she gasped more from shock than pain. Isolde had never been this brazen before, this careless about leaving marks that might be seen. The Luna was losing control, and that terrified Rowan more than the beating itself. The second strike landed across her back. The third wrapped around her ribs. And something inside Rowan, something that had been dormant and compliant for nearly 5 years, finally snapped. Her hand shot out instinctively. Catching Isolde's wrist mid-swing, for one breathless moment, they stared at each other. The Luna shocked that her victim had dared to fight back. Rowan equally stunned by her own audacity. Let go of me, Isolde snarled, her beautiful face twisted with rage. Instead, Rowan pushed, not hard, not violently, but enough to break free of the Luna's grip, enough to make Isolde stumble backward. And Isolde, ever the actress, let herself fall. The Luna hit the floor with a theatrical cry, one hand flying to her head as if she'd been struck. The whip landed perfectly in Rowan's trembling fingers, placed there by Isolde's quick movements, though any observer would swear the servant had been wielding it all along. Guards! Isolde's scream carried through the castle halls. Help! She's attacking me! Heavy boots thundered up the stairs. The door burst open, revealing 3 guards with weapons drawn. Their eyes swept the scene. Their Luna on the floor, tears streaming down her perfect face. A visible red mark blooming on her cheek where she'd scratched herself during the fall. And Rowan standing over her with the whip still clutched in her hand and blood dripping down her back. Seize her, the lead guard commanded. Rowan didn't fight. Zergiri, rough hands grabbed her arms. What would be the point? The evidence was clear. The story already written. She had attacked the Luna. That's what everyone would believe. What the law would recognize. And the punishment for such a crime was death. As they dragged her toward the dungeons, Rowan caught a glimpse of Maeve in the corridor. The old cook's face had gone pale, her lined hands pressed to her mouth in horror. Their eyes met for one brief moment. Rowan tried to convey everything she couldn't say aloud. Thank you for your kindness. Don't intervene. Save yourself. Then the darkness of the dungeon stairs swallowed her whole. Callum was halfway to his chambers when Theron intercepted him. The beta's weathered face was grave with concern. Alpha, there's been an incident. Your presence is required immediately. The formality in his oldest friend's tone made Callum's wolf stir restlessly. What kind of incident? The Luna was attacked by one of her servants. The girl is in the dungeons, awaiting your judgment. Callum's jaw tightened. Isolde had a habit of causing drama whenever he returned from campaign. Usually some elaborate scheme to secure his attention or sympathy. Attacked how severely? A mark on her face, some bruising. Nothing that requires a healer's immediate attention. Theron paused. Something in his expression shifted. But Alpha, you should see the servant girl before you make your judgment. There are inconsistencies. That was unusual. Theron didn't question pack law lightly, and the law in this matter was crystal clear. A servant raising a hand against the Luna was punishable by immediate execution. No trial, no appeal, no mercy. It was one of the oldest laws designed to protect pack leadership from those who might abuse their positions of service. Very well, take me to the dungeons first. The cell was dark, lit only by a single torch that cast dancing shadows across damp stone walls. The girl sat in the corner, knees drawn to her chest. For a moment, Callum couldn't see her clearly. Then she lifted her head and amber-colored eyes caught the firelight. Recognition hit him with unexpected force. The kitchen girl from years ago, the one with the unusual features, the one Isolde had requested as her personal servant shortly after their marriage. He'd barely thought of her since that day, had assumed she'd been treated well in the Luna service. The assumption shattered the moment he truly looked at her. "Stand up," he commanded, his alpha voice carrying automatic authority. The girl rose slowly, each movement stiff with obvious pain. Her dress was torn and soaked with blood, fresh wounds across her shoulders and back that hadn't been treated. But it was the other marks that made Callum's breath catch in his throat. Old scars layered across her arms, the kind that spoke of repeated trauma over months or years, burns in distinct patterns, cuts that had healed poorly. The evidence of systematic abuse written across her skin in a language no alpha could misread. His wolf surged forward, snarling with protective rage that had no business existing for a stranger accused of attacking his Luna. But the instinct was undeniable, overwhelming. His wolf recognized something in her, something primal, that bypassed all logic and reason, something that made his beast want to destroy anyone who'd harmed her. His vision flickered. Gold bleeding into gray, claws extending involuntarily from his fingertips. The change threatening to overtake him right there in the cell. Theron's hand landed heavy on his shoulder. "Alpha, control." Callum forced his wolf back down, breathing hard, shaking with the effort of restraint. What was happening to him? He'd never lost control like this. Not in battle. Not in grief. Not ever. "What is your name?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "Rowan, Alpha." Barely a whisper, hoarse with exhaustion or tears or both. "And you attacked my Luna." "I..." Rowan swallowed hard. Callum watched her throat work around the words. "I pushed her when she struck me. I didn't mean... I just wanted her to stop." The honesty in her admission caught him off guard. A guilty person would have denied everything, would have pleaded innocence or claimed self-defense more forcefully. But this girl simply stated the facts, as if she'd already accepted her fate and saw no point in fighting it. "Show me your back." "All of it." Rowan hesitated, shame and fear warring in her expression. But she obeyed. She turned and let the ruined dress fall forward, exposing skin marked by what must have been years of torture. Fresh welts from tonight's beating crossed over older scars. Burn marks. Cuts. The distinctive parallel lines left by a whip used more than once, more than a dozen times. Something dark and furious uncoiled in Callum's chest. These weren't the injuries of a single incident, a moment of violence between servant and mistress. This was a pattern of sustained cruelty, hidden beneath long sleeves and careful silence. "How long?" he demanded. "Nearly 5 years, Alpha." 5 years, the entire duration of her service to Isolde, the entire span of his marriage. "And you never spoke of this to anyone." Rowan pulled her dress back up, turning to face him again. There was no accusation in those amber eyes, only resignation. "Who would have believed me, Alpha? I'm just a servant. She's the Luna, and pack law is clear about our respective positions." She was right, and that truth burned worse than any wound. "The law is also clear about your crime tonight," Callum said, his voice cold because his wolf was too close to the surface, too angry to trust himself with warmth. "Attacking the Luna carries a single penalty." "I know." Rowan lifted her chin slightly. Callum saw the strength beneath her submission. This girl had survived years of abuse without breaking. She would face death with the same quiet courage. "I accept my punishment, Alpha. I only ask that my body be burned properly, not left for scavengers. My parents, they deserve better than I could give them. At least grant me a proper end." The mention of parents struck something tender in Callum's system. Before he could question the impulse, he said, "I'm ordering a healer to examine you before dawn." Surprise flickered across her features. "Alpha. Standard procedure for all executions." He lied smoothly. It wasn't standard at all. But Theron wouldn't question him, and Callum needed time to think. "Guards will bring the healer shortly. Cooperate fully." He turned to leave but paused at the cell door. Without looking back, he added, "And Rowan, if you're lying to me about those scars, about any of this, I will know. And your death will be far less merciful than the quick end the law prescribes." "I'm not lying, Alpha," she said softly. "I've done many things to survive, but lying has never served me well." Callum left the dungeons with his mind churning and his wolf prowling restlessly beneath his skin. Something about this situation felt fundamentally wrong, and he hadn't stayed alive this long by ignoring his instincts. Theron descended the dungeon stairs 2 hours before dawn, carrying a torch that cast wavering shadows across stone walls slick with moisture. He'd served the Stone family for 20 years, long enough to develop instincts about when something didn't add up. And tonight, nothing about this situation felt right. The girl sat exactly where Callum had left her, knees drawn to her chest, eyes reflecting the torchlight when she looked up. She didn't flinch at his approach, didn't scramble backward or plead for mercy, just watched him with the wary stillness of someone who had learned long ago that begging accomplished nothing. "The Alpha ordered a healer to examine you," Theron said, unlocking the cell door. "But I wanted to speak with you first. Off the record." Rowan tilted her head slightly. Why? Because I've been beta to this pack long enough to recognize when evidence doesn't match the crime." He stepped inside, keeping his distance to avoid spooking her. "Your injuries are fresh. The Lunas are superficial. Yet you're the one facing execution." "That's how the law works," Rowan said quietly. "Servants don't strike their betters regardless of provocation." Provocation." Theron crouched down to her eye level, studying the marks visible on her arms in the firelight. "Tell me about these scars, the old ones." For a long moment she said nothing, then so softly he almost missed it. "What does it matter? I'll be dead by morning anyway." "It matters because I've served this pack since before you were born, girl. And I've never known Alpha Callum to execute someone without being certain of their guilt. He's ordered the healer to document your injuries. That's not standard procedure. That's an Alpha looking for reasons to question his own judgment." Something flickered in Rowan's expression. Hope, perhaps, or simply disbelief that anyone in power might actually care about the truth. Her hands trembled as she wrapped her arms tighter around her knees. "If I tell you and nothing changes, then I've betrayed my silence for nothing. But if I stay quiet, then I die having never spoken my truth." She looked up at him, those amber eyes bright with unshed tears. "Which way leads to less regret, Beta Theron?" "The truth always leads to less regret, even when it hurts." So Rowan told him everything. The healer arrived as the first gray light of pre-dawn began to filter through the high dungeon windows. She was an older woman named Iris, skilled in both medicine and the subtle energies that govern shifter physiology. Her examination of Rowan was thorough, conducted in tense silence while Theron watched from the cell entrance. "Well," he demanded when she finally stepped back. Iris's expression was grim. "The physical injuries are extensive and show clear patterns of repeated trauma over years. Burns cuts evidence of malnutrition and systematic abuse." She paused, then added quietly, "And there's something else. This girl has a wolf." Rowan's eyes widened in shock, as if even she hadn't quite believed it would be detectable. "The wolf is blocked," Iris continued, "trapped behind severe psychological trauma. But it's there, strong and vital, pressing against barriers this girl erected to protect herself from pain she couldn't process." She turned to Theron. "She is absolutely a shifter, Beta, just one who's been unable to complete her transformation." Everything changed in that moment. Pack law was absolute about one thing. Shifters had rights that humans did not. Rowan wasn't just a servant who'd attacked the Luna. She was a pack member with a confirmed wolf, entitled to proper investigation and the possibility of challenging her accuser if she chose. Theron wasted no time. He gathered his evidence. The testimonies from servants who'd worked near the Luna's chambers, Iris's findings, the documentation of Rowan's injuries, and carried it directly to Callum's chambers as the sun broke over the mountains. The Alpha was already awake, staring out his window with the look of a man who'd spent the night wrestling with impossible decisions. He turned as Theron entered, those gray eyes stormy with barely contained emotion. "Tell me you found something," Callum said. "Tell me there's a reason to question what seems obvious." "There are dozens of reasons, Alpha." Theron laid out everything he'd discovered, watching his friend's expression darken with each revelation. "The girl has been tortured for years. Multiple witnesses confirm it. And the healer has confirmed she's a shifter with a blocked wolf, which means she has legal rights we cannot ignore." Callum's hands clenched into fists. How many others knew? How many saw and said nothing? Most turned a blind eye. Some tried to help and disappeared. Maeve, the head cook, has been protecting her in secret, providing food and medicine. But she was too afraid to speak openly after the Luna silenced the last person who tried. "Bring me Maeve," Callum said, his voice deadly quiet, "and prepare a private chamber. I want to speak with Rowan again, but not down there. Not in chains. Bring her up. Treat her with dignity. And the Luna. Tell Isolde nothing for now. Let her think the execution will proceed as planned." Callum turned back to the window. His reflection in the glass showed a man caught between duty and instinct, between law and justice. "I need to understand what's been happening in my own territory while I've been blind to it. Maeve arrived within the hour, her weathered face pale but determined. Under Callum's direct questioning and Alpha command to speak only truth, she confirmed everything Rowan had said, and added details that made his blood run cold. Incidents she'd witnessed, injuries she'd treated in secret, the servant girl who'd vanished after showing Rowan kindness. "Why didn't you come to me?" Callum demanded, though he already knew the answer. "Because I tried once, Alpha." Maeve's voice shook. "3 years ago, I went to a trusted guard, told him what I'd seen. He disappeared the next day, transferred to the most dangerous border post where rogues attack regularly. A young girl who'd been kind to Rowan vanished that same night. The message was clear. Speak up and people die." "That ends now," Callum said, his wolf snarling beneath his skin, demanding action, demanding protection for the innocent, demanding justice. But he forced himself to be methodical, to gather evidence properly, to build a case that would stand before the Council of Elders. Because if he moved too quickly, if he let rage guide him instead of reason, he could spark civil war within his own pack. "There's one more thing you should know, Alpha," Maeve said quietly. She twisted her hands together. An old woman gathering courage to speak a truth she'd kept hidden for a decade. "Rowan is my granddaughter." Callum's head snapped up. "What?" "My daughter married outside the pack, fell in love with a warrior from the southern territories. They had Rowan raised her in a cottage near the border. When rogues attacked," Maeve's voice broke. "When rogues killed them, Rowan was 10 years old. She tried to shift to save her parents, but the trauma was too severe. Her wolf got stuck halfway through the transformation, blocked by grief she couldn't process." Tears tracked down the old cook's lined face. "I found her 4 days later, nearly dead in the forest. I hid her identity to protect her. Shifters with blocked wolves are treated worse than humans who never had the gift. So I let everyone think she was just a foundling without wolf blood. And I've watched her suffer for 5 years, unable to stop it without putting more people at risk." Callum stood motionless, processing this revelation. Rowan wasn't just some servant girl. She was Maeve's granddaughter, a child who'd lost her parents to violence, who'd been damaged by trauma and then tortured for years by his Luna. His wolf howled inside him, demanding he tear Isolde apart with his bare hands. But he was Alpha, and Alphas didn't act on rage alone. "You will tell no one else this truth," he commanded. "Not yet. When the time is right, Rowan will decide who knows her bloodline. But for now, we protect her by keeping this secret." "Yes, Alpha." Maeve bowed her head. "Thank you for seeing her, for not looking away." After she left, Callum stood alone in his chambers, staring at the mountains beyond his window. The sun was fully risen now, painting the peaks in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere in this stronghold, his Luna was likely preparing for the execution, anticipating her victory, confident that pack law would protect her and destroy the girl who'd dared to fight back. And somewhere else, Rowan sat in a guest chamber instead of a cell, probably confused, certainly afraid, waiting to learn whether this Alpha would be another person who looked away from her suffering. Callum's wolf pressed against his control, not with rage now, but with certainty. This girl, this woman who'd survived impossible things and still had strength enough to ask only for a proper burial, who'd endured 5 years of torture without breaking, who carried her grandmother's blood and her parents' courage. His wolf recognized something in her that felt like fate, like destiny, like the mate bond his kind rarely found but always yearned for. But first he had to ensure she lived long enough for either of them to understand what that recognition meant. He called for Theron. "Send word to the council elders, emergency session in 3 hours, and begin a quiet investigation into the Luna's previous attendants. I want to know what happened to all of them, every single one." "Already started, Alpha." Theron's expression was grim. "You're not going to like what we're finding." "Tell me anyway." 4 attendants before Rowan. 2 died in suspicious accidents. 1 fell downstairs and broke her neck. Another drowned in the river. Both ruled accidental at the time. The other 2 fled the territory and haven't been seen since. We're trying to track them down now. Callum's jaw tightened. "Find them. I want living witnesses." And Theron? "Yes, Alpha. Double the guard on Rowan's chamber. Tell them she's under my personal protection. Anyone who tries to harm her answers to me directly." Because if Isolde realized her carefully constructed lie was unraveling, she would try to eliminate the evidence. And Callum would not allow this girl, this survivor, to become another casualty of his blindness. He'd failed her once by not seeing what was happening in his own household. He would not fail her again. In her new chamber, Rowan stood by the window. watching the sunrise paint the mountains in colors she'd almost forgotten existed outside of memory. She didn't understand what was happening, why she'd been moved from the dungeon to this comfortable room, why guards stood outside her door but made no move to chain her, why the Alpha had looked at her scars and his wolf had nearly broken free with protective fury instead of disgust. It felt like a dream, the kind she'd had in the early days of her captivity, before hope had become too painful to indulge. But the burn on her arm was real. The ache in her back was real. The fear coiled in her stomach was very, very real. And somewhere in this stronghold, Isolde was planning, scheming, preparing her next move. Because the Luna didn't lose. She couldn't afford to. And Rowan had just become a threat that needed to be eliminated. Inside her chest, her wolf stirred, pressing against the walls that had caged it for 14 years, as if it sensed the danger, as if it wanted to protect her the way it had failed to protect her parents. But the barriers held, as they always had. Rowan pressed her palm against her heart, feeling the creature thrash uselessly against its prison. "Not yet," she whispered to the wolf inside her. "Not yet." But maybe, just maybe, if she survived this, if the Alpha's strange protection meant something real, maybe someday soon she would learn to break free. The sun climbed higher, morning spilled across the stronghold, and Rowan waited to discover whether she would live to see another dawn, or whether Isolde's mask would hold long enough to ensure her silence became permanent. The Council of Elders convened in silence. 3 ancient shifters seated at a table carved from mountain oak, their weathered faces grave in the morning light. Callum stood before them, hands clasped behind his back. Every muscle in his body held rigid with the effort of appearing calm when his wolf demanded action. Elder Thornwick spoke first, silver beard bristling as he leaned forward. "You're asking us to question the Luna's account of an attack, to investigate our own pack leader's mate based on injuries that could have come from anywhere. I'm asking you to look at evidence," Callum said. His voice carried the weight of command without raising in volume. "Medical documentation, witness testimony, a pattern that spans 5 years. Patterns can be fabricated." Elder Moira's eyes were sharp despite her age. "Servants lie to avoid punishment. It's happened before. Not like this." Theron stepped forward, laying parchment across the table. 4 previous attendants, 2 dead in suspicious circumstances, 2 vanished without trace, all within months of serving the Luna personally. The 3rd Elder Brennan picked up one of the documents. His hands shook slightly as he read. When he looked up, something haunted lingered in his gaze. "I remember the girl who fell down the stairs 3 years ago. The Luna was distraught, blamed herself for not watching her more carefully." "Did you see the body?" Callum asked quietly. A pause, too long. "No, the Luna had her prepared for burial before anyone else could examine her." Silence fell like a stone into deep water. Elder Thornwick's jaw tightened. "Even if we accept that something improper occurred, you're proposing we investigate the daughter of Alpha Brennan Graythorn, an alliance that keeps our northern border secure. That provides trade routes we depend on for survival. You're risking war over one servant girl." "One pack member," Callum corrected. His gray eyes held steel. "The healer confirmed Rowan has a wolf. Blocked, yes, but present, which means she has legal standing, which means we investigate properly, or we become the kind of pack that protects abusers because it's convenient." Moira studied him with the intensity of someone who'd lived through 6 Alpha transitions. "You're very certain about this, Callum. More certain than evidence alone would warrant." She paused. "Your wolf reacted to her, didn't it?" Callum's silence was answer enough. Thornwick exhaled slowly. "We grant you 5 days. Full investigation. Interview anyone you need to interview. But if you find nothing conclusive, the girl faces justice for attacking her Luna, and you will explain to Alpha Graythorn why you delayed his daughter's vindication." "Agreed." "And Callum," Moira's voice softened, "be careful. If Isolde truly is what you suspect, she won't sit idle while you unravel her secrets. Cornered predators are the most dangerous of its kind." Theron left at dawn the next day. He rode hard toward the southern territories following leads that had taken weeks to uncover. 2 women who'd fled Stronghold Shadow Peak years ago. 2 survivors who might hold the truth that would save Rowan's life. He found the first in a village 3 days' ride from the border. The house was small, nestled between pine trees that whispered in the morning wind. Theron knocked twice before the door cracked open, revealing a woman's face. Suspicious, scarred along one cheek. "I'm looking for Briar Thornwood," he said gently. The door started to close. "No one here by that name. Please." Theron held up both hands, showing he carried no weapons. "I'm Beta of Shadow Peak. I'm here about Isolde Graythorn, And I need your help to stop her from hurting someone else. The door stopped moving. For a long moment, nothing, then it opened wider. The woman who emerged looked older than her 32 years. Dark hair shot through with premature gray. Eyes that had seen things no one should have to see, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. You're 3 years too late, Beta. I know, and I'm sorry for that. But there's a girl in the stronghold right now, facing execution for fighting back against the Luna. If you don't help, she dies tomorrow. Briar's expression flickered, something between grief and rage. What's her name? Rowan. The quiet one from the kitchens, with the amber eyes. When Theron nodded, Briar closed her eyes. Gods, she was just a child when I left. Isolde took her 5 years ago, right after you disappeared. Briar's hands clenched into fists. Of course she did. I should have warned someone, but I was so afraid. She trailed off, then straightened her spine. What do you need me to do? Come back with me. Testify before the council. Tell them what Isolde did to you. They won't believe me. No one believed me before. They'll believe you now, Theron said, because this time you won't be alone. The second survivor took longer to find. Neve had gone farther, hidden deeper. It took Theron another 2 days to track her to a convent near the eastern mountains, a place where women who'd fled violence came to find peace. The Mother Superior met him at the gate, her expression kind but firm. We don't give up the names of our residents, not to anyone. I'm not here to take her back, Theron said. I'm here to ask if she'll help save someone else from the same fate. Something in his tone must have convinced her. She disappeared into the stone building, leaving Theron to wait in the courtyard. When she returned, a woman followed, slight, graying, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd learned to make herself small. Neve. She was 41 but looked 60, lines carved deep around her mouth and eyes, and when she turned her head, Theron saw why she'd come here. Her left ear was damaged, mangled in a way that spoke of violence, not accident. You're from Shadow Peak, she said, not a question. Yes, I need to ask you about your time serving Luna Isolde. Neve's remaining good ear seemed to strain toward him. I can't hear well. She damaged the left one when she pushed me down the stairs. The right one's failing too. You'll have to speak clearly. Theron moved closer, enunciating carefully. There's a girl, 24 years old. She fought back when the Luna attacked her. Now she's facing execution. But Alpha Callum is investigating. He needs witnesses. People who know what Isolde really is. Neve's hands trembled. I can't. If I go back, she'll kill me. She can't touch you. The Alpha has placed the girl under his personal protection. Anyone who testifies will have the same protection. You don't understand, Neve's voice cracked. I had a friend, another servant. She saw Isolde hurt me. She was going to tell the Alpha. The next day she was gone. Just gone. They found her body in the river 3 weeks later. Theron's gut clenched. We have evidence of that now. Your friend's death is part of what we're investigating. Her name was Kira. Neve's eyes filled with tears. She was 19. She had a little brother she was saving money to support. And Isolde took her life like it meant nothing. Then help me make sure Kira's death meant something, Theron said quietly. Help me save this girl. And maybe together we can make sure no one else suffers what you suffered. Neve was silent for a long time. Then she nodded. When do we leave? Rowan woke to the sound of rain. It drummed against the window of her chamber with steady insistence. Gray morning light filtered through the glass, turning everything soft and muted. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Not in the tiny cupboard where she usually slept. Not in the cold dungeon cell. Somewhere safe. The thought felt foreign. Dangerous. Hope had betrayed her too many times to trust it now. A knock at the door made her tense. But the voice that followed was familiar. Rowan, it's Maeve. I've brought breakfast. Her grandmother. The words still felt strange in her mind. All these years she'd had family. Someone who shared her blood. Someone who'd protected her in the only way she could. Rowan opened the door. Maeve entered carrying a tray laden with food. More than one person could eat in a day. The old cook's way of compensating for 5 years of forced starvation. You look better, Maeve said, setting the tray down and studying Rowan with critical eyes. The healer's salves are working. The scars will fade. Rowan touched her arm where the iron burn was already healing faster than it would have in a human. Her shifter nature accelerating the process even if she couldn't access her wolf fully. They always do, eventually. Not all scars are on the skin, child. Rowan looked away. No, they're not. Maeve settled into the chair by the window, watching her granddaughter with eyes that held too much sorrow. The Alpha is investigating, really investigating. He's sent Beta Theron to find the others who served Isolde, the ones who survived. There were others, Rowan's head snapped up. 4 before you. I didn't know their stories. Didn't know if any survived besides you. But if they did, Maeve reached across the space between them, took Rowan's hand in her weathered one. You won't have to face this alone. The words hit harder than they should have. Rowan had been alone for so long. The thought of sister survivors, others who understood, made something crack in her chest. What if they don't come back? What if they're too afraid? Then you'll still have me, Maeve said firmly, and you'll have the Alpha. Whatever else Callum Stone is, he's not a man who looks away from injustice once he sees it. Rowan wanted to believe that, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford, not yet. Iris the healer came that afternoon. Callum had ordered daily examinations, officially to document Rowan's healing for the council investigation. But Iris, with her kind eyes and gentle hands, had other purposes. I want to try something different today, she said, settling onto the floor across from Rowan. We're going to work on reaching your wolf. Rowan stiffened. I've tried. For 14 years I've tried. It doesn't work. Because you've been trying to break through trauma by force, fighting against it. Iris's voice was patient. Today we're going to try going around it instead, using memory not of the pain but of the love that came before. I don't understand. Your wolf got blocked the night your parents died, when you saw violence and couldn't process it. Your mind locked your wolf away to protect you from more pain than you could handle at 10 years old. But that wolf isn't gone. It's waiting. And maybe it doesn't need you to forget the trauma. Maybe it just needs you to remember why it wanted to emerge in the first place. Iris gestured for Rowan to close her eyes. Tell me about your mother. Not how she died, how she lived. Rowan's throat tightened. I don't talk about them. I know, but maybe it's time to try. For a long moment, Rowan sat frozen. Then haltingly words came. She used to sing, while she cooked, while she cleaned, while she tucked me into bed. Old songs from her grandmother's pack. I didn't understand all the words, but the melody was beautiful. Haunting, like wind through trees. Good, what else? She smelled like pine needles, always. She'd run in the forest every morning, and the scent would cling to her fur, then transfer to her skin when she shifted back. Tears tracked down Rowan's cheeks, though her eyes remained closed. And she laughed, so easily. My father would do something silly, and she'd throw her head back and laugh like it was the most delightful thing in the world. Tell me about your father. He was patient, so patient. He taught me to track by scent when I was 6. We'd spend hours in the forest, and he never got frustrated when I made mistakes. He'd just crouch down, show me again, let me try as many times as I needed. He had this deep laugh that made his whole body shake. And when he hugged me, I felt completely safe, like nothing bad could ever happen as long as he was there. Inside her chest, something stirred. Her wolf, pressing against the barriers, but differently than before. Not with violence or desperation, with longing, with recognition of what had been lost and what remained. Now remember the night they died, Iris said softly. Not the violence, the love. They fought to protect you. Your mother shielded you with her body. Your father stood between you and the rogues even when he was wounded. They chose you, Rowan. Over their own lives, they chose you. The barriers trembled. Your wolf tried to emerge that night to protect them. It's been waiting ever since, trying to honor their sacrifice. Let it out, Rowan, not to fight, just to be. Something inside her fractured, not painfully, but like ice melting after a long winter. Her wolf surged forward, and this time when Rowan reached for the transformation, the barriers didn't slam shut. They dissolved. Her eyes blazed amber gold, claws extended from her fingertips, fangs pushed past her lips. It wasn't a complete shift, but it was farther than she'd gotten in 14 years. Her wolf was there, present and aware, no longer trapped behind walls of trauma. Rowan opened her eyes, looking at her transformed hands in wonder. I did it. I actually did it. You did, Iris smiled, and you'll do it again. Each time will be easier. Your wolf is finding its way back to you. That night, Theron returned. He brought 2 women with him, both travel-worn, both carrying the weight of old nightmares in their eyes. Callum met them privately, away from curious gazes and listening ears. When Briar and Neve entered his study, he saw immediately what Isolde had done to them. The scars visible and invisible. The wariness of prey animals who'd learned predators wore beautiful faces. "Thank you for coming," he said simply. "I know what it cost you." Briar spoke first, her voice hard. "We're not here for you, Alpha. We're here for the girl, for Rowan, because no one came for us when we needed saving." Fair enough. For the next 3 hours, they told their stories. Briar's tale of burns and beatings, of being attacked because Alpha Callum had asked her to pass him salt at dinner, of fleeing in the middle of the night with only the clothes on her back. Neve's account of systematic cruelty, of being pushed downstairs, losing her hearing, watching her friend murdered for trying to help, of hiding in a convent because even years later she feared Isolde would find her. Callum listened to every word, his wolf prowling beneath his skin, demanding justice, demanding blood. When they finished, he spoke carefully. "The healer examined me yesterday. At my request, she found traces of a rare toxin in my blood. From Greythorn territory. I've been weakening for 2 years. Isolde has been slowly poisoning me." Neve's remaining good eye widened. "She's been poisoning you. Every night. In the tea she prepares personally. She presents it as wifely devotion. But it's attempted murder." Briar let out a harsh laugh. "Of course it is. Why would she stop at torturing servants when she could kill an alpha and let her family take control of the territory?" "The question is proof," Callum said. "Testimony helps. Medical evidence helps. But I need absolute certainty before I bring this before the council, before I accuse the daughter of Alpha Greythorn publicly." "You want her to confess?" Neve's words were statement, not question. "Yes. She won't, not to you, not to anyone she sees as a threat." "Then we need to make her feel safe enough to reveal herself." Callum looked between the two women. "And I think I know how." The storm came 3 nights later. Thunder rolled across the mountains like the drums of war. Lightning split the sky in jagged white lines. Rain pounded against the stronghold stones with violence that made the walls seem thin. Rowan woke gasping. For a moment, she was 10 years old again, crouched in the corner of a cottage while rogues tore her parents apart outside. Her mother's screams, her father's snarls, the wet sound of claws through flesh. The storm covered everything, the sounds of death hidden beneath thunder and rain. She couldn't breathe, her chest constricted, her vision tunneled. Panic clawed up her throat in a scream that wouldn't come. The door to her chamber burst open. Callum stood there dressed hastily, hair loose around his shoulders, eyes sharp with concern. He took one look at her and crossed the room in 3 strides. "Rowan, look at me." She couldn't. The past held her too tightly. "Listen to my voice." His tone carried alpha command, not harsh but undeniable, forcing her focus to him. "Feel my hand on your shoulder. You're not in that cottage. You are in Stronghold Shadow Peak, and I swear on my life that nothing will hurt you here." His hand was warm, solid, real. Slowly Rowan's breathing evened. Present bled back into past. The cottage faded, replaced by the guest chamber. By safety. "Callum!" Her voice came out broken. "I'm here." Another crack of thunder. Rowan flinched. Callum moved without thinking, pulling her against his chest, one hand in her hair, the other holding her steady. "It's just weather," he murmured. "Just rain. Nothing more." But they both knew it wasn't true. For her, it would never be just rain. So Callum started talking, telling her stories about his childhood, about learning to shift for the first time and accidentally destroying his father's study, about Theron teaching him to track by scent when he was barely 10, about the time he'd gotten lost in the forest and his mother had found him 3 days later, convinced the world was ending without her pup. Anything to keep her grounded, anything to anchor her in the present and away from memories that threatened to drown her. Gradually, Rowan's trembling subsided, her breathing steadied, and they stayed like that for hours, his back against the wall, her curled against his chest, listening to the storm pass while he held her safe. Somewhere in those dark hours, something shifted between them. Not romance, not yet, but recognition, understanding, the beginning of trust. When dawn light finally crept through the windows, Rowan stirred. "You stayed all night. You needed me to." She pulled back slightly, looking up at him with eyes that held too much vulnerability. "Why are you doing this, helping me? I'm nobody. Just someone who attacked your Luna." "You're someone who deserves justice," Callum said quietly. "Someone who survived impossible things. And my wolf knew that from the moment I saw your scars. It recognized something in you that I'm still trying to understand. But I know this much: you deserve better than what you've been given." The air between them felt charged, dangerous, full of things neither could say yet. Rowan looked away first. The council meets today to hear the evidence. Yes. What happens if they don't believe? Then I invoke my right as Alpha to override their decision, and I deal with the political consequences after. She studied him, this man who'd been a stranger days ago, who now felt necessary in ways that terrified her. You'd risk war for me. I'd risk war to do what's right. Isolde found Maeve alone in the kitchen that afternoon. The Luna swept in with her usual grace, smiling at the servants who scrambled to acknowledge her, playing the role of benevolent leader's mate. But her ice-blue eyes were cold when they landed on the old cook. A word, Maeve, privately. The other servants fled quickly, leaving the two women alone among the herbs and hanging pots. Maeve kept her expression neutral, but her heart hammered against her ribs. The Alpha has been spending time with my former attendant, Isolde said. Conversational. Light. I find that curious. Medical necessity, my lady. The girl's injuries required monitoring. Isolde ran one finger along the countertop, examining it for dust. You know what I find most interesting? How quickly the investigation shifted from my attack to my character, almost as if someone had been waiting for an opportunity to strike at me. I wouldn't know about such things, my lady. No. Isolde's smile turned sharp. I think you would. I think you've been watching me for 5 years, documenting, waiting, and now you've found your champion in the Alpha. Maeve said nothing, just held the Luna's gaze. You think I'm a monster? Isolde continued, her voice dropping to something almost confessional. But do you know what my first year here was like? My mother-in-law, Callum's mother, she taught me what it meant to serve as Luna. The proper way to maintain authority, the importance of knowing your place and ensuring everyone else knows theirs. She moved closer, close enough that Maeve could smell her rose perfume, could see the calculation behind her beauty. She beat me, Isolde said softly, for the smallest infractions, speaking out of turn, wearing the wrong gown, existing in ways she found displeasing. So I learned, I adapted, I became what this world demanded. Strong, ruthless. Pain taught me to inflict pain. And I taught your precious Rowan what the world taught me. That power is the only thing that matters. That mercy is weakness. That you destroy threats before they destroy you. That doesn't justify what you've done, doesn't it? Isolde laughed. Cold, brittle. She's a servant who forgot her place, who looked at my husband like she had rights to him. So I taught her the lessons I learned. Is that not how the world works? She's a child you tortured for 5 years, Maeve said, her voice shaking with restrained fury. She's someone who survived, like me, and if she's strong enough, she'll emerge from this even stronger than before. If she's not, Isolde shrugged, then she was never going to make it anyway. What Isolde didn't know was that Theron stood in the pantry behind a half-open door, hearing every word, bearing witness to a confession the Luna thought was private. His presence, invisible and silent, would be the thread that unraveled everything. The council reconvened at sunset. The 3 elders sat in judgment. Before them, Callum presented his evidence. Medical records, Briar's testimony, Neve's account, documentation of suspicious deaths, and Iris's findings about the toxin in his own blood. The pattern is undeniable, Callum said. Luna Isolde has systematically abused at least 5 women over 7 years. She's murdered at least 2, and she's been attempting to kill me for more than 2 years. This isn't a case of one servant making false accusations. This is comprehensive evidence of sustained criminal behavior. Elder Thornwick studied the parchment before him. The evidence is compelling, but we must consider the political ramifications. Isolde is Alpha Greythorn's only daughter. Accusing her publicly could fracture our alliance, could lead to war. Then we find a way to ensure justice without war, Callum said. But we don't ignore this. We don't protect an abuser because it's convenient. There is one more piece of evidence. Theron stepped forward. This afternoon, I witnessed Luna Isolde confess to Maeve. She admitted to torturing Rowan specifically because the Alpha looked at her once. She referenced learning cruelty from Callum's mother. She framed her abuse as teaching strength. I heard every word. Silence fell like snow. Elder Moira leaned back. A witnessed confession changes everything. If Beta Theron testifies under oath, his word as second to the Alpha holds legal weight. I'll testify, Theron said, under any oath you require. Thornwick exchanged glances with the other elders. something unspoken passing between them. Finally, he nodded. Very well. We authorize a public trial. 5 days from now, all evidence will be presented before the full pack. Isolde will have the opportunity to defend herself. But if the evidence holds, then she faces judgment, Callum finished, as pack law demands. Rowan learned of the trial that evening. Callum came to her chamber as darkness fell. His gray eyes were stormy but determined. When he told her about the council's decision about Briar and Neve's testimonies about Theron's witness confession, she felt something shift in her chest. Hope, fragile and terrifying, but real. You found them, she whispered. The others, they came back. They came back for you, to make sure you didn't face this alone. Callum moved to the window, looking out at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. In 5 days this ends, one way or another. What if the pack sides with her, she's their Luna, I'm nobody? You're Maeve's granddaughter, your parents were warriors. You survived 14 years of trauma and 5 years of torture. You have more strength than anyone in this stronghold, Rowan. You just don't see it yet. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that justice was possible, that speaking truth could change things. Will I have to testify in front of everyone? Only if you want to. Briar and Neve's accounts combined with the medical evidence and Theron's testimony should be sufficient. But if you feel strong enough to speak, your voice will carry weight. The pack needs to hear from you directly. Rowan thought about it, about standing before hundreds of shifters and exposing her scars, about speaking aloud the things she'd kept silent for so long. The idea terrified her, but maybe that was the point. Maybe healing meant choosing courage even when fear screamed to stay hidden. I'll testify, she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. They need to hear the truth, all of it. Callum's expression softened. You're braver than you know. I'm not brave, I'm just tired of being afraid. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Rowan asked the question that had been building for days. Your wolf reacted to me, in the dungeon. Why? Callum was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. My wolf recognized something in you, something important, and I've learned to trust those instincts even when I don't understand them. Is that why you're helping me? No, I'm helping you because it's right, because you deserve justice, because no one should suffer what you've suffered. My wolf's reaction just confirmed what I already knew, that this investigation needed to happen, that the truth needed to be uncovered. The words settled into Rowan's chest, warming places that had been cold for so long. She didn't know what this was between them, didn't know if she was capable of trusting anyone that deeply. But for the first time in 14 years, she wanted to try. 5 days later, the Great Hall filled with pack members. They came from throughout the territory, drawn by news that shook the foundations of everything they thought they knew. Their Luna was accused, their Alpha demanded justice, and the truth would finally be spoken aloud. Rowan stood in the preparation chamber, Briar on one side, Neve on the other. 3 survivors about to face their abuser publicly. Are you ready? Briar asked. Her voice steady but her hands shaking. No, Rowan admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. Neve took Rowan's hand, squeezed gently. We're with you. Whatever happens, you're not alone. The words meant more than Neve could know. For so long, Rowan had believed she was the only one, that her suffering was unique, that no one would understand. But here were 2 women who'd survived the same nightmare, who'd found the courage to come back. Who would stand beside her as she finally spoke her truth? The doors opened. Callum stood in the doorway, his presence commanding even in silence. It's time. The 3 women walked forward together, into the great hall where hundreds of eyes watched, where Isolde sat at the high table beautiful and composed, where the council of elders waited to hear evidence that would change everything. Rowan's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept walking. One step, then another, carrying the weight of 5 years of silence, ready finally to break it. The great hall of Stronghold Shadow Peak had never held so many bodies. Pack members pressed shoulder to shoulder, filling every available space. The air thick with tension and the mingled sense of hundreds of shifters gathered in judgment. Torches lined the stone walls, casting flickering shadows that danced across faces both curious and concerned. At the high table, the council of elders sat in somber authority. Elder Thornwick in the center, his silver beard catching the firelight. Moira to his left, sharp eyes missing nothing. Brennan to his right, hands folded before him with deliberate calm. Beside them, Isolde Greythorn sat with perfect posture, her golden hair arranged in elaborate braids, her ice blue gown matching her eyes. beautiful and composed every inch the wronged Luna seeking justice for an unprovoked attack. But her knuckles were white where they gripped the arms of her chair. Callum stood before the assembly, his gaze scanning the crowd with the measured authority of an alpha who knew his next words would reshape everything. Behind him, Theron waited with documents carefully organized, evidence that had taken days to compile, truth that had been hidden for far too long. We gathered tonight for judgment. Callum's voice carried to every corner of the hall, not shouting, but undeniable. 5 days ago, Luna Isolde accused her personal attendant of attacking her without cause. Pack law is clear. Such an act merits immediate execution. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Agreement. Tradition demanded swift justice. But pack law is also clear about something else, Callum continued. Evidence must be examined. Truth must be heard, especially when the accused is confirmed to possess a wolf and therefore holds legal standing as a full pack member. More murmurs, confused this time. Most hadn't known the servant girl had shifter blood. Tonight we examine evidence. We hear testimony, and we discover whether justice demands the execution of a servant who defended herself or the accountability of a Luna who betrayed every vow she swore. The hall went silent. Isolde's face remained serene, but something flickered in her eyes. The first crack in her mask. Elder Thornwick rose. Let the testimonies begin. Briar came forward first. She walked with the careful precision of someone who'd spent 3 years learning to feel safe again. Her scarred face caught the torchlight as she stood before the assembly. When she spoke, her voice started quiet but grew stronger with each word. My name is Briar Thornwood. I served as Luna Isolde's personal attendant for 8 months 3 years ago. During that time, I was burned, beaten, and starved for infractions that included passing Alpha Callum the salt when he asked for it at dinner. Gasps from the crowd. Isolde's expression didn't change, but her jaw tightened imperceptibly. The Luna told me I had forgotten my place, that servants didn't interact with the Alpha directly unless ordered to do so. She used heated irons on my arms and back, left me without food for 3 days. When I tried to speak to the head healer about my injuries, that healer was reassigned to a remote outpost the next morning. Briar pulled back her sleeves, revealing scars that matched the patterns Rowan carried. Deliberate, methodical, the marks of someone who knew exactly how to inflict pain. I fled in the night, abandoned my family, my home, everything I knew, because I understood that staying meant dying. And I've spent 3 years hiding, terrified she would find me and finish what she started. She looked directly at Isolde. But I'm here now because another girl deserves better than I got, and because those who stay silent protect those who harm. Briar stepped back. The hall remained silent, processing, beginning to understand. Then Neve came forward. She moved slowly, one hand trailing along the wall to help orient herself. When she reached the center, she turned to face the crowd and the damaged side of her face became visible. Gasps echoed through the chamber. My name is Neve Ashwood. I served Luna Isolde for 6 months 4 years ago. I'm 41 years old, but my hearing is that of someone twice my age because the Luna pushed me down a stone staircase when I smiled at Alpha Callum during a festival. Her voice was clear, despite the obvious effort it took to speak loudly enough. I lost partial hearing in my left ear immediately. The right one has been failing ever since. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was watching my friend die because she tried to help me. Neve's hands shook. Her name was Kira. She was 19. She saw what happened, saw the bruises, and she was going to tell Alpha Callum the truth. The next day she disappeared. 3 weeks later they found her body in the river. Called it an accidental drowning. She paused, let the words sink in. It wasn't an accident, and I've carried the guilt of her death for 4 years because I was too afraid to speak up. Too afraid to save the next girl. Well, I'm not afraid anymore. Or maybe I am, but I'm doing this anyway. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Angry now, horrified, beginning to turn. Isolde finally spoke, her voice carrying the wounded dignity of falsely accused nobility. These women are lying, obviously. They've been paid or coerced, or they seek attention. I've never harmed anyone. I don't even know these people. You don't remember me? Briar's voice cut like a blade. You burned in my arms on a Tuesday afternoon in late spring 3 years ago. You told me I should be grateful you were teaching me respect. You said your mother-in-law taught you the same lessons when you first came here. Isolde's face went white, the detail too specific to dismiss. Elder Moira leaned forward. Luna Isolde, did your mother-in-law treat you harshly when you arrived at Stronghold Shadow Peak? That's, that's irrelevant to these proceedings. Answer the question. A long pause. Then quietly. She was strict. She had high standards for what a Luna should be. Did she strike you? Isolde's composure cracked further. She was teaching me, preparing me for leadership. It wasn't abuse, it was education. And did you apply these same teaching methods to your attendants? I never. Isolde stopped, realizing the trap. These accusations are baseless. Where's the proof anyone can claim anything? Theron stepped forward. There's medical documentation. The healer examined all three women and confirmed their scars matched patterns of intentional repeated torture. Furthermore, I personally witnessed a confession. He produced parchment covered in careful script. 5 days ago, I overheard Luna Isolde speaking to Maeve, the head cook in the kitchen. She admitted to torturing Rowan specifically because Alpha Callum looked at her once. She referenced learning cruelty from the previous Luna. She framed her abuse as teaching strength and maintaining proper hierarchy. He's lying, Isolde said, but her voice had lost its conviction. I swear this testimony under Alpha's oath, Theron said, his words carrying the weight of unbreakable pack law. Everything I witnessed is truth, and I'll submit to any verification the council requires. Elder Thornwick's expression was grave. Beta Theron, under Alpha's oath, did you hear Luna Isolde confess to abusing Rowan? Yes. Did she reference other victims? Yes, she called Rowan nothing, said she was teaching her place, said pain taught her to inflict pain, and that power is the only thing that matters. The crowd's anger grew audible, voices rising in outrage and disbelief. Callum raised one hand. Silence fell immediately. There's more. The healer examined me at my request. She found traces of a rare toxin in my blood. From Greythorn territory. I've been slowly weakened for over 2 years. Shock rippled through the assembly. Someone has been adding this substance to my evening tea. The same tea my devoted wife prepares for me personally each night. The same tea she presents as wifely care and affection. Isolde stood abruptly. You can't possibly believe. Sit down, Elder Moira commanded. You'll have your chance to defend yourself. But first we hear all the evidence. Callum gestured and Rowan stepped forward. She hadn't planned to speak. Briar and Neve's testimonies should have been enough. But standing there watching Isolde maintain her mask even as it crumbled, Rowan felt something shift inside her. These people needed to see, to understand. Not just that their Luna was cruel, but why silence had been maintained for so long. My name is Rowan Ashford, she said, her voice quiet but steady. I'm 24 years old. I've served Luna Isolde for 5 years, and every day of those 5 years has been a lesson in surviving what I couldn't escape. She moved to the center of the hall, where everyone could see her. I'm going to show you what 5 years of teaching looks like. Slowly, deliberately, she removed the shawl covering her arms, then unlaced the back of her dress. Let it fall forward to expose her scarred back to the assembly. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Gasps, cries of horror. Even hardened warriors turned away from the evidence written across her skin. Burns in perfect circular patterns, cuts that formed deliberate lines, bruises in various stages of healing, the map of systematic torture that no one could dismiss or explain away. This is what happens when you're unlucky enough to catch an alpha's attention for 3 seconds, Rowan said. When you exist as a threat that must be destroyed. When you have no power, no voice, no one who will believe you if you speak. She pulled her dress back up, turned to face Isolde directly. You told Maeve I was nothing, that I deserved this because I looked at your husband like I had rights. But I didn't look at him with desire or ambition. I looked at him with the same respect I gave to anyone in authority. And you destroyed 5 years of my life because of it. Isolde's mask shattered completely. You want to know why I did it? Her voice was shrill now, desperate. Because I saw how his wolf recognized you. For 3 seconds, he looked at you and something shifted in his eyes. I've been married to him for 5 years and he's never looked at me that way. Never. So yes, I took you. I broke you. I made sure you could never be what I saw in that moment. The confession hung in the air. Undeniable. I learned from the best, Isolde continued, bitter laughter escaping. His mother taught me that love is weakness, that power requires ruthlessness, that you destroy threats before they destroy you. So I did. I survived by being stronger than everyone else, by making sure no one could challenge me. She looked at Callum. something broken in her ice-blue eyes. And you never even noticed. 5 years of torturing her, and you never saw. You were too busy playing the noble alpha to realize what was happening in your own household. The accusation landed. Callum's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. I failed, he said quietly. I should have seen, should have known. That failure is mine to carry, but your actions are yours alone, and you will answer for them. Elder Thornwick rose. Luna Isolde Graythorn, this council has heard testimony from 3 survivors. We've reviewed medical evidence. We've witnessed a confession given under duress and another given in anger. The evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. His voice carried the weight of judgment. You are guilty of systematic abuse of pack members, of murder through negligence and intent, of attempted poisoning of your alpha, of violations of the Luna's sacred code too numerous to list. Isolde swayed, all fight draining from her. What happens now? The traditional penalty is death or banishment, Elder Moira said, both appropriate for crimes of this magnitude. Wait. Everyone turned. Rowan stood with her hands clasped before her, eyes clear and certain, despite the trembling in her voice. I have legal standing as a pack member with a confirmed wolf, which means I have the right to speak to sentencing, and I request an alternative. Elder Thornwick frowned. What alternative? Banishment solves nothing. It sends her away where she can hurt others. Execution ends one life, but heals none of us. I request that Luna Isolde remain here, stripped of title and privilege, and serve in the house of restoration we're going to build. A sanctuary for abuse survivors. She'll counsel victims, help them heal, face daily what she's done. Not as punishment alone, but as accountability through service. Silence. Stunned. Disbelieving. Briar stared at Rowan. You want her to stay. I want her to undo some of the harm she's caused. I want her to spend years helping the women she hurt. Learning what it means to serve instead of dominate. It's not forgiveness, it's something harder. It's making her live with what she's done and actively work toward being better. The crowd erupted, half in agreement, half in outrage. The elders leaned together, debating in urgent whispers. Isolde looked at Rowan with something between hatred and incomprehension. Why would you show me mercy? This isn't mercy, Rowan said quietly. This is giving you a choice. To hide from what you've done, or to face it every single day and try to make something right from the wreckage. Which one terrifies you more? The debate raged for an hour. Some pack members demanded blood, traditional justice, death for such crimes. Others saw wisdom in Rowan's proposal, a way to transform an abuser into someone who might prevent future abuse. Then the doors burst open. A contingent of warriors entered wearing the silver and green of Graythorn territory. At their head walked a man in his 60s, silver streaking through dark hair, bearing the unmistakable authority of an alpha. Brennan Graythorn had arrived. The hall went silent, all eyes on the father who would either defend or denounce his daughter. Brennan strode to the center. His gaze swept over the assembly, taking in the evidence, the accusers, his daughter's broken posture. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. I received word of these proceedings 2 days ago. I've ridden without stopping to arrive in time. He looked at Isolde. Tell me these accusations are false. Tell me you didn't bring shame upon our family. Isolde's face crumpled. Father, tell me, I did it. Her voice broke. All of it, everything they said. Brennan closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his expression was carved from stone. I came here hoping for different answers, prepared to defend you against slander. But I heard your confession as I entered. I heard you admit to torture, to murder, to systematic abuse of the helpless. He turned to face the council. Alpha Graythorn hereby severs all ties with Isolde Graythorn. We disavow her actions, her crimes, her existence. She speaks only for herself, not for our territory, not for our bloodline. Judge her as you will. We will not interfere. Isolde gasped. Father, no. You are no daughter of mine. Brennan's words fell like stones. I have spent 30 years building our territory's honor, and you have destroyed it in 5. Whatever consequences you face, you've earned them. The political maneuvering was brilliant in its cruelty. By disowning Isolde publicly, Brennan saved his family's reputation and eliminated any justification for war. He'd sacrificed his daughter to protect his territory's standing. Isolde stood alone. No title, no family, no protection. Just a woman facing judgment for crimes she could no longer deny. Elder Moira spoke carefully. Alpha Graythorn, this council appreciates your honesty, but we must ask, were you aware of your daughter's nature before tonight? Brennan's jaw tightened. I knew she was cold, calculating. I thought those were strengths in a Luna. I didn't know. He trailed off. I didn't want to know. That's not good enough, Neve said, her voice cutting through the tension. You're her father. You raised her. These patterns don't appear overnight. No, Brennan admitted, shoulders sagging. They don't. And perhaps I saw signs I chose to ignore. Perhaps I valued alliance over character. Perhaps I'm complicit through willful blindness. I'll carry that burden, but I will not protect her from consequences I should have imposed years ago. He turned to leave, then paused. The Graythorn territory offers one concession. To ensure peace and demonstrate good faith, I will personally guarantee Isolde's safety during whatever sentence you impose. If she's harmed unjustly, I will investigate. But if she harms anyone else, I won't intervene in her punishment. Consider it my penance for failing to see what I should have seen. The council deliberated through the night. Pack members remained in the hall, unwilling to leave before judgment was pronounced. Rowan sat with Briar and Neve, the three survivors waiting together. Maeve stood behind them, one weathered hand on Rowan's shoulder. Callum paced near the back of the hall, his wolf restless, demanding justice but trusting Rowan's wisdom and proposing something beyond simple revenge. Finally, as dawn light began filtering through high windows, Elder Thornwick called for silence. This council has reached a decision, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of what came next. Luna Isolde, former Luna Isolde, you are guilty on all counts. By rights, you should face death, but this council recognizes wisdom in the alternative proposed by Rowan Ashford. He paused. You are hereby sentenced to 10 years of service in the House of Restoration, which will be established to provide sanctuary and healing for abuse survivors. You will work under strict supervision, counseling those you've harmed and others seeking help. You will live as you forced your victims to live, without power, without privilege, without the ability to hurt anyone. Thornwick's gaze was stern. If you harm a single person during this time, if you attempt to flee, if you fail in your duties, execution will be immediate. No appeal, no second chances. Do you accept these terms? Isolde looked at the floor. Broken, defeated. I accept. Furthermore, Elder Moira added, Alpha Callum's marriage to you is annulled on grounds of fraud, attempted murder, and fundamental betrayal of the mate bond. You hold no claim to this pack, this territory, or this Alpha. Isolde nodded. No fight left. But Elder Brennan rose. There is one matter unresolved. The Graythorn territory demands assurance that Isolde won't be harmed or killed in secret. We need a guarantee. The crowd shifted, tense again. This could still fracture into war if handled poorly. What do you propose? Callum asked carefully. Brennan opened his mouth to answer, but another voice spoke first. I offer myself. Maeve stepped forward. 65 years of life carried in weathered features, but her spine was straight, her voice clear. I invoke grandmother's right, an ancient custom that still holds in pack law. I offer myself as honored hostage to the Graythorn territory for 1 year. My life is guarantee of Isolde's fair treatment. If Shadow Peak harms her unjustly, you may take my life in exchange. Gasps echoed through the hall. The custom was old, rarely used, but still binding. No, Rowan stood abruptly. You can't. Hush, child. Maeve's eyes were gentle. I've lived a long life. You're just beginning yours. This is my choice. My gift to you and to peace between our peoples. Brennan studied the old woman. You would do this, offer yourself to guarantee the safety of someone who tortured your granddaughter. I would do this to secure peace, to show that justice doesn't require vengeance, and to ensure my granddaughter can begin healing without war looming over her future. The Graythorn Alpha nodded slowly. I accept. Maeve of Shadow Peak will be our honored guest for 1 year. She'll be treated with respect, housed comfortably, and returned safely when the term ends. Then it's settled, Elder Thornwick declared. Let it be recorded. Isolde Graythorn is sentenced to 10 years service. Maeve will spend 1 year in Graythorn territory as guarantee of fair treatment, and Shadow Peak commits to establishing the House of Restoration within 3 months. He struck his staff against the stone floor, the sound echoing like thunder. This trial is concluded. Justice is served. The crowd dispersed slowly, processing everything they'd witnessed, everything that had changed. Rowan found Maeve in the corridor, threw herself into her grandmother's arms and wept. You're leaving. I just found you, and now you're leaving. Only for 1 year, little wolf, Maeve stroked Rowan's hair. And I'll be safe, comfortable. They won't risk harming an honored hostage. It would violate every code. But I need you here. No. Maeve pulled back, held Rowan's face between her weathered hands. You need to learn you're strong enough without me. You need to stand on your own bill, your sanctuary become the Luna you were meant to be. And when I return in a year, I want to see what you've accomplished. Luna, Rowan's voice wavered. I'm not. You will be. That Alpha looks at you like you hung the moon. His wolf recognized yours before either of you understood what it meant. This is your future, Rowan. Don't be afraid of it. They held each other for a long moment. Grandmother and granddaughter, two survivors of different generations, connected by blood and trauma and love that transcended both. I'll make you proud, Rowan whispered. You already have. That night, Rowan couldn't sleep. Too much had happened. Too much had changed. Her mind raced with everything that came next. Building the sanctuary, learning to live without fear, figuring out what came next with Callum. She stood at her window watching moonlight paint the mountain silver. Lost in thought. A soft knock. Callum's voice. May I come in? Yes. He entered quietly, stood beside her at the window. For a while, neither spoke. Just shared the comfortable silence of two people who'd been through battle together. Your grandmother is remarkable, Callum said finally. She's everything I should have been years ago, brave enough to act. You were brave. You survived. That took more courage than most people ever need. Rowan turned to face him. What happens now? Now we build what you envisioned, the House of Restoration, a place where survivors can heal without fear, where abuse gets documented and addressed rather than hidden. And us? The question came out smaller than she intended. What happens with us? Callum's gray eyes held hers. That's your choice. My wolf recognized yours the moment I saw you. But recognition doesn't mean obligation. You've spent 5 years being controlled. I won't control your choices now, even if my wolf is certain about what it wants. What does it want? You as my mate, as my Luna, as my partner in everything. He reached out, stopped himself. But only if that's what you want too. No pressure, no rush. Take all the time you need to figure out who you are when you're free to choose. Rowan felt her own wolf stir, pressing against the barriers that had held it captive for so long. But this time the walls weren't made of trauma. They were made of caution, of learning to trust, of needing time to become whole before joining with another. I need time, she said, to heal, to find myself, to understand what I want versus what I've been conditioned to accept. I'll wait, however long it takes. What if I'm never able to fully transform? What if my wolf stays blocked? Then we figure it out together. But Rowan, he smiled slightly, I don't think your wolf is blocked anymore. I think it's been protecting you until you were ready. And I think you're closer to ready than you realize. As if summoned by his words, her wolf surged forward. Not with desperation or fear, with purpose. Rowan gasped, her eyes flashing amber gold, claws extending, fangs pushing past her lips. But this time she didn't stop there. She thought of her mother's white fur, her father's patient teaching, Maeve's quiet protection, Briar and Neve's courage to come back, Callum's unwavering support, all the love that had carried her through darkness. The transformation swept through her like a wave. Her bones restructured, fur erupted across her skin. The change that had been denied for 14 years finally blessedly completed. She stood on 4 legs, a sleek wolf with silver gray fur and amber eyes. Smaller than Callum's wolf would be, but strong. Whole. Finally completely whole. Callum's breath caught. You did it. Rowan looked at her paws, at her reflection in the window glass, at the wolf she'd been denied for so long. Joy and grief mingled in her chest. Joy for what was finally possible. Grief for all the years lost. She shifted back, the transformation flowing smoothly in reverse. When she stood on 2 legs again, tears streamed down her face. I can shift. After 14 years, I can finally shift. Callum pulled her into his arms, held her while she cried. Release and relief in overwhelming emotion that had no words. Your parents would be so proud, he murmured. I wish they could see. Maybe they can. Maybe they've been watching all along, waiting for this moment. They stood together as moonlight spilled through the window. 2 wolves who'd found each other against impossible odds. Who would build something better from the ruins of what came before? 6 months passed. The House of Restoration rose on the eastern edge of Shadow Peak territory, A sprawling building with comfortable rooms, healing spaces, and gardens where survivors could walk without fear. Rowan oversaw every detail, from the soft colors meant to soothe trauma to the locked doors that gave each resident control over their own safety. Breyer and Neve stayed, became counselors who understood what new arrivals faced, who could offer wisdom born of survival. Isolde worked in the kitchens, cleaning, preparing food, speaking only when spoken to. The former Luna reduced to the role she'd forced others to endure. Some days bitterness showed on her face. Others something almost like understanding. Redemption was slow work, painful work. But she showed up each day, did her duties, began the long process of facing what she'd done. PAC reforms spread through Shadow Peak. Monthly health checks for all household staff. Anonymous reporting systems. Elder oversight of power dynamics. Slowly the culture shifted, from one that protected abusers to one that protected victims. Word spread to other territories. More survivors arrived. Women who'd suffered in silence, who'd heard about the sanctuary and dared to hope. The House of Restoration filled with stories of trauma, and slowly, carefully with stories of healing too. Maeve sent letters from Greythorn territory, brief but warm, describing her comfortable quarters, the respect she received, her pride in what Rowan was building, counting down the days until she could return. And Rowan and Callum's bond deepened, not rushed, not forced, but growing naturally as she healed, and he proved himself worthy of trust. They took long walks through the forest, ran together in wolf form, talked late into the night about dreams and fears and futures. 3 months after the trial, Callum asked formally, "Rowan Ashford, will you be my mate, my Luna, my partner in all things?" She said yes. The claiming ceremony happened under the full moon. Simple, intimate, just PAC witnesses and the vows that mattered. Callum's bite marked her throat. Her bite marked his. The mate bond sealed completely in gold light and merged souls. When they ran together afterward, two wolves moving as one through moonlit forest, Rowan felt something she'd never thought possible. Peace. 8 months after the trial, Rowan stood outside the House of Restoration, one hand resting on her belly where new life grew. 8 weeks pregnant, still secret except for Callum and Iris. The afternoon sun warmed her face. Inside the building, voices echoed. Survivors sharing stories. Counselors offering guidance. The sound of healing happening in real time. A commotion at the gates caught her attention. A young woman approached, maybe 22, thin, haunted eyes, moving with the careful wariness of prey that had learned predators wore friendly faces. "I'm looking for the House of Restoration," the girl said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You found it." Rowan moved closer, keeping her body language open. Non-threatening. "I'm Rowan. What's your name?" "Kira." A pause. "Luna Morgana of Western Territories. She's like what I heard Isolde was. Maybe worse. I couldn't stay anymore. Someone told me there was a place here. A place that helps." Rowan's heart clenched. So it continued. Would always continue. As long as power existed, some would abuse it. But now survivors had somewhere to go. Someone who would believe them. "You're safe here," Rowan said gently. "Come inside. Let me show you what's possible when you're finally free." She led Kira toward the building, toward safety, toward healing. Behind them, Callum appeared. His hand found Rowan's free one, squeezed gently, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this work. "Another one?" he asked quietly. "Another one. Western Territories this time. Luna Morgana." His jaw tightened. "We'll need to investigate. Quietly. Build evidence like we did before." "I know, but first we help her. Then we help others. Then we change the system. One territory at a time if we have to." They stood together, Alpha and Luna, survivors who'd become advocates, building something that would outlast them both. Behind them, the House of Restoration stood against the sky, windows glowing with warm light, a beacon for those seeking refuge, a promise that healing was possible, that voices mattered, that wounds could become wisdom. 3 months later, 9 months after the trial, a carriage arrived from Greythorn territory. The Greythorn Alpha had released Maeve 3 months early, recognizing her sacrifice and Isolde's compliance with her sentence. An unexpected mercy, but one gratefully received. Maeve stepped out, weathered hands gripping the carriage door. But her spine was straight, her eyes bright with pride as she took in the sprawling sanctuary her granddaughter had built. Rowan ran to her, no longer the broken girl who'd hidden in kitchens, now a Luna, a leader, Someone strong enough to embrace her grandmother without fear. "You're home," Rowan whispered. "I'm home. Now show me everything." They walked through the House of Restoration together. Maeve's eyes bright with pride as she saw what her granddaughter had created. The survivors who'd found safety. The counselors who'd found purpose. Even Isolde working quietly in the kitchen, earning her redemption one day at a time. That evening, the pack gathered for a feast, celebrating Maeve's return, celebrating the sanctuary's success, celebrating the slow, steady change happening across territories. Rowan stood before them, no longer invisible, no longer silent, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. One hand resting on her now visible belly, 5 months pregnant, soon to be announced. "My grandmother taught me something important," Rowan said, her voice clear and strong. "That protecting others even when you can't protect yourself is not weakness. It's the foundation of real strength. That one person's choice to act can ripple outward and change everything." She looked at Maeve, at Callum, at Briar and Neve, at every survivor who'd found the courage to speak. This house of restoration exists because people chose truth over silence, justice over convenience, healing over revenge. It will stand for generations. A reminder that wounds can become wisdom, that voices have power, that what we build together outlasts what was broken before. She placed both hands on her belly, the pregnancy impossible to hide now. "My child will grow up knowing their mother transformed pain into purpose, that their great-grandmother sacrificed freedom for peace, that their father chose justice over easy alliance. They'll inherit a world that's safer because people before them refused to look away from suffering." Rowan's voice grew stronger, carrying the weight of everything she'd survived and everything she'd built. "The scars I carry are part of my story, not of weakness, but of endurance, not of shame, but of survival. And every person who walks through those doors will learn the same truth. That being wounded doesn't mean being defeated, that healing is possible, that we can take what tried to destroy us and build something that saves others." The pack erupted in cheers, celebrating their Luna, their sanctuary, their future, and in that moment Rowan felt completely, perfectly whole. Not because the scars were gone, they would always be part of her, but because she'd chosen what they would mean.